Thank you very much, Paul, and thanks for the introduction. Yeah, my name's Charles Devenish. I'm the managing director from Adexon Fire and Smoke Curtains. We design and manufacture a range of fire and smoke curtains of the various configurations, which we'll go over today. What I'm going to just talk about today, though, is some step change improvements that we've had in the marketplace over recent years, third-party certification and the status quo around that, and regulations and standards. So a little bit about us, our mission and vision. Our mission is to foster industry-wide innovation to improve performance and reliability whilst ensuring third-party certified products and legal compliance are the norm. This, you might say, is table stakes, but it's not always the case currently, and we are working to make that the norm. We think from a risk perspective and for the consumer safety perspective, they should both be table stakes. They should be everyday provisions. And then our vision is to make the UK the global leader in active fire and smoke curtains, and we're doing this through quality innovation, raising performance expectations, which we'll see in this some of the step change improvements we've had, and continually improving. We have a charter which is legal, certified, better. This is something that guides us in our day-to-day. So legal part of the charter is that products that are covered by a harmonized standard are legally required to be CE marked. You may be aware of that. It's the Construction Products Regulations 2013 that we signed up to as a country all those years ago. They're still applicable. There's been the introduction of designated standards, which are essentially the harmonized standards but brought into UK law, and the CE marking has been joined by the UK CA mark, but they're both current, and we're seeing some continuation of CE marking into 2025 and possibly beyond. We have some news recently on that. So that's a mandatory requirement. A product covered, which is the word used in the regulations, by a harmonized standard are legally required to be CE marked. Certified, we say this is a very, very close second. We believe for a life safety product such as fire curtains that valid third-party certification is mandatory for best practice. And again, that's something that we guarantee and provide to our customers and those that use our products. And better, this is a, you might say a claim, but we do have tangible benefits to our design that we can demonstrate. So today, if you want to come across to our virtual booth, there's myself and Jack. Be glad to catch up and answer any questions you might have. At the end of the session, somebody's just saying there that sound's dropped. Can you still hear me? Don't know if anybody can answer that. If you can still hear me. Okay, so if you've got any questions, please, come across and see us at the virtual booth or reach out any other channel. Some key takeaways that we'd like to, all good, Paul?
Yeah, all good.
Good. Some key takeaways that we'd like you to get from today's presentation, just so that you've got some value. Thanks everyone for confirming in the chat. Just so you've got some value to take away with you. Fire curtains are brilliant products, especially if you're an architect or a designer. They provide you with, we'll go into this in a bit more detail, but they provide you with a lot of flexibility around the design of your space and opening up areas so that you can have, really world-class areas without having to close in, and you can still have compartmentation. Key takeaway number 2 is don't be sold the old, and key takeaway 3 is don't chance it, and we'll just open that up for you a little bit more. So brilliant products. What they are, there's 3 configurations that you'll may be familiar with. There's the concertina there you see on the left, which is the circular one, which is essentially a say freestanding, but it's invisible in the ceiling. It doesn't have any guide supports. It can be completely invisible when it's at a site. It can be in the middle of an area like you see there on a staircase. We've got some going in at Liverpool Football Club on a couple of concessionary areas where they need to have, essentially they've got a fire risk in the concessionary area and they want to be able to close that off in the event of a fire, but they don't want guide rails because of the footfall on match days. Then you've got horizontal, the picture in the middle. If you want to have open atria, and the fire engineer says we need to compartment between floors in the event of a fire, then you can achieve both of those aspects with a horizontal fire curtain. When it's in its fully closed retractor position, it's out of sight. And then vertical, which you'll be more familiar with potentially. That is the vast majority of the market is vertical fire curtains, and they're available in a number of classifications. I always like to describe fire curtains to somebody completely new to them as a modern form of a roller shutter. So essentially a goal post, the vertical, the most common application is. There's a barrel in the head box which houses the motor, and the fabric, a fire-resistant fabric, wraps around that barrel. That's all contained in the housing, and that would normally be built into the ceiling. And then there's a couple of guides down each side which retains the fabric. These are very important, and they ensure that the fabric actually stays in place during a fire. So we'll just move on to some of the benefits of them. They're easy to fit and less destructive if they activate. That is partly in comparison with a sprinkler system. Not saying that they're alternative products, they can be used in conjunction, but they're just a consideration. There's some really high performances available with fire curtains. We've got up to 2 hours integrity, 2 hours integrity and radiation, which is the 120 EW, if you're familiar with the European classifications. And we can also achieve a 3-hour EI. That is in conjunction with a sprinkler. So just back to that comment where they can be used together. And the applications are really, the limit is our imaginations. You know, with the 3 different configurations that we have available, and we as a company have the widest range of third-party certified and legally compliant fire curtains in the UK. Back to our charter, we really do believe it is important, and we've invested in that. Enable open plan flexible designs. They provide that fire compartmentation that you need if it's been stipulated in the fire strategy. So you can remove walls, and they're very compact and lightweight. So I mentioned them in as a comparison with a roller shutter. One of the benefits is they're a lot more compact, much more smaller head boxes, so you don't need as much space in the ceiling voids, and they're lighter, so you don't need as much structural support steelwork. Key takeaway number 2 is don't be sold the old. I'll just flip to the next slide just to quickly show you what the old is. So traditionally, and we did this ourselves up to 5 years ago, is the fabric is retained in the 2 side guides using a bolt, a nut, or a popper through the fabric, just like a fabric popper like you see there. This is very enlarged, blown up, so you can see it. This is a section through the side guide, but essentially that popper will stop the fabric coming out through that gap. It's the only thing that stops it coming out of the gap. So if you push against the fabric, like fire will do, it will exert a pressure in a fire, then those poppers, or if it's a nut and a bolt, will stop it coming out of the guide, so it'll stay in place and do its job. The only trouble with this is that old design is the 3 most common headaches with fire curtains are all traced back to that design. So you can see from the images there, you've got tears in the fabric where the poppers have just torn out. That leads to even bigger gaps. These poppers are spaced maybe 200 mil apart or 500 mil apart, depending on the design that someone has. And when you lose one through the fabric tearing, you then got a much bigger gap. And obviously that then means the fire curtain won't act and perform in a fire as it was tested. The middle image there, which is a graph from a fire test in 1363, which is the heat curve, which is used for all fire tests. That just shows you the temperature after 5 minutes in a fire, which is, you want me to read the table, but we can get you a copy of this afterwards, and we've got it on the website. It's over 500 degrees in a fire test after less than 5 minutes. So just to come back to this design here, so you've got, with the old design, you've got penetration of fabric, which leads to tears and rips. You've got the metal nuts or poppers, these jamming guides, and we get caught, just to give you an idea, you've probably had, if you're familiar with fire curtains, you've probably had projects with these on, is the metal popper, the fabric won't necessarily unroll perfectly square every time. Obviously, what's okay in a laboratory setting when you're doing a test is one thing, and then what's installed out on site, you might say in a construction environment, it can be something a little bit different. Might well work on day 1 handover, but what we see is over months or years, these jamming frequently, and we get called out to them. So we and then the other feature there you can just see is the cold smoke seals. I won't go into too much detail on that. We have got an article, and we'll be glad to talk to anyone afterwards or anytime on those, but we do have articles on it. But essentially, cold smoke seals are a polypropylene filament which melt at 170 degrees C, And just back to that graph that I showed you is after less than 5 minutes in a fire, you're at 570 something degrees C. So those cold smoke seals might be on a 2-hour rated fire curtain. They're lasting only seconds in natural fire temperatures. So some step change improvements. We basically realized sort of some 5 years ago that if fire curtains were really going to realize their potential, they're great products. If they're going to realize the potential, we needed to come up with a design that overcame these headaches. So we came up with the design you can see here on the screen, which is a full-length steel pole in the guide where the fabric is wrapped around that and then double stitched back. What this gives you is it means that there's no more rips and tears in the fabric because we don't have any penetration. We've not got any jamming and snagging because we've not got those traveling fasteners or bolts or poppers. And we don't have any gaps and billowing at the edges because we've got continuous retention. This has been described as genius by people in the industry who have been familiar with fire curtains and their issues, which are frustrating when you've got such a good concept as a fire curtain. And then we've come up with this design, as I say, been nominated for awards, London Construction Awards this year. It's all third-party tested and certified. So it's we mention it as new, but it's actually a few years now in the running. And we also we use fire-resistant components for the smoke control. So we're using the same fire-resistant fabric to achieve our smoke control, and again third-party tested, so there's no polypropylene cold smoke seals in there. Again, we can discuss around the British standards when we've got some more time. If anybody's interested, be more than happy to discuss that. We also have a REBA accredited CPD which goes over all these points in a bit more detail, and there's more time obviously to discuss. So third-party certification. This is one of the first aspect of don't chance it is valid third-party certification is nearly as imperative as legal compliance for a life safety product such as fire curtains. Without it, the risk is on you as a specifier or as a buyer, whatever function you have. Third-party certification is essentially a notified body, valid third-party certification. A notified body will go into the production facility and actually undertake periodic audits of the production. It'll check the widgets that are coming off the production line, that they are the same as that was tested months or years ago. Is the manufacturer making them the same as they had tested? Has there been any deviation? Are the processes the same? Are the components the same? Is the design the same, identical? And this will all be audited, and that takes a huge amount of risk off you as a specifier. There's no upsides to taking the risk of having a non-third-party certified product, and there's a lot of downsides. We've got an article on the website going into this in a bit more detail. If anyone's interested in that, we can share the link. So just on standards, BS 8524, which has been a popular standard in the UK. We created it as a country, so we're rightly proud of it 10 years ago. It has been replaced by a European standard, BSEN 16034. It's retained its popularity here in the UK. It doesn't have third-party certification anymore. That expired. The last third-party certification expired in June this year, on June the 9th. Anybody that claims or implies they have valid third-party certification for BS 8524, it is plainly misleading, because it's not. And we have plenty of articles on that just for your peace of mind, and so you can check actual source references. And I think we'd be joined unanimously by all fire industry professionals would advocate using third-party certification or not using a life safety product without valid third-party certification. The only exception there would be if somebody had a vested interest for saying otherwise, which we can obviously ignore those for when we're looking at just pure life safety advice. And we just mentioned there, unless there's no alternative, obviously, but in this case with fire curtains, there is an alternative. And here we've got it, BSEN 16034. It's current, it's valid, it's got third-party certification, it's a comprehensive standard, it's a European standard, which we've seen. The Building Safety Act has a consultation out at the moment on removing BS 476 series in favour of European standards. They are deemed generally to be more thorough, and especially in connection with the fire test, they expose the product to more thermal exposure, and it's legally required. And this is a borrowing the old war poster, don't take the risk without valid third-party certification, the risk is on you. Regulations and standards, just don't chance it. Second point is all vertical fire curtains must legally be CE marked to BSCN 16034 from 1st November 2019. It's a requirement of the construction product regulations. We say don't be talked into taking the risk on this unless somebody will personally indemnify you against the consequences. The penalties do include, for breach of the CPR, do include imprisonment, and non-compliant products could render a building uninsurable or void the insurance in the event of a fire. There's just no point accumulating this as a legacy risk. And the regulations in the UK are very, very simple. We're governed by the construction product regulations, and products that are covered by harmonised standard have to be CE marked. And there's only one harmonised standard for fire curtains, that is 16034. This was interesting. The steering group was challenged by some in this country who would favour 8524, the British standard, and they had a look at that and determined still that the 16034 does apply to vertical fire curtains. And this is a quote from BSI: standards aren't the same as regulations, and following a standard doesn't guarantee within the relevant laws. A product standard, just to give you an idea, is a collection of product tests. So that's the difference. A product standard will give you a more holistic view of an assessment of a product because it will have a fire test, for example, a smoke test and a cycle test. And there's 3 of the current common product standards in the UK, which we've touched on a couple of those. This just points up that in the harmonised standard forward, this European standard should be given the status of a national standard, and conflicting national standards should be withdrawn at the latest by October 2019. So just a quick one on compliance and risk. Conflicting national standard, BS 8524, it doesn't have CE marking, and there's no valid third-party certification for it. We've got some details here on comparison between 8524 and 16034. The pros and cons for both of them, the improvements required in 8524 if it does come back to market. We touch on 9999, just conscious of time here. Was 8524 a stringent standard? Well, some of the poorest products actually on the market are actually tested to 8524, so you can't just take it per se. We're being asked in a large office block in London to take out some 8524 products which have only been in for 3 years, and that's going to cost the client over £100,000. We've got some more content there on 8524 and 476, which we'd be glad to talk to people about afterwards. And the summary really is the key takeaways is the fire curtains are brilliant products. Don't be sold the old, and don't chance it on third-party certification and legal compliance. As I mentioned, we've got a REBA accredited CPD, which is free to book online. Please reach out to us. We can do that in person at your offices, or we can do it online. And then you can follow us on LinkedIn or get a copy of our monthly newsletter. And that's it from us.